It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in our modest ranch-style home in suburban Ohio. The kind where the whir of the dishwasher and the distant bark of neighborhood dogs create a false sense of normalcy. I'd just returned from the grocery store, my back aching from lugging bags up the driveway, my fingers numb from the cold plastic handles, slipping off my sneakers in the mudroom. I paused when I heard his voice, my husband, Tom's, drifting from the living room. He was chatting with Nurse Elena, the part-time caregiver we'd hired after my doctor warned me about burnout. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. The door was ajar, and their words carried like smoke through the air. "I don't know how she does it," Elena said softly, her tone laced with genuine admiration. 17 years is a hell of a commitment. Tom let out that bitter, raspy laugh he developed since the accident, the one that always made my stomach twist. "Please," he scoffed. "She's no martyr. She's just free labor. Always around. Always tidying. Always hovering. I never asked her to throw her life away for this." The words landed like a punch to the gut. But I didn't drop the groceries. I didn't gasp. I didn't shatter. Instead, something deep inside me fractured silently. A hairline crack spreading through years of built-up resilience. 17 years. I'd poured 17 years into him, not just as a wife, but as a full-time nurse, therapist, and silent partner in his suffering. I'd bathed him when his skin grew raw, fed him when his hands trembled too much to hold a spoon, repositioned him every few hours to prevent bedsores that could turn deadly. I'd skipped family reunions in Michigan, missed my sister's wedding in California, watched friendships fade like old photographs, because who has time for coffee dates when your world revolves around a hospital bed in the living room? I'd quit my job at the local bakery, where I'd risen early to knead dough and frost cakes, turning my passion into a distant memory. And now, in his eyes, I was just free labor. I stepped into the room slowly, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside. Tom didn't even look up at first, still smirking at his own cleverness. Elena's eyes flicked to me, widening in alarm, her mouth opening as if to intervene. But I wasn't there for apologies or explanations. I walked straight to the supply cabinet, pulled out one of his adult briefs, the kind I'd changed without complaint for nearly 2 decades, and placed it softly on his lap. He stared down at it, then up at me, his smug expression crumbling. I met his gaze evenly, my voice calm as still water. "Good luck handling things on your own." Then I turned and walked out, my footsteps echoing in the hallway like the final ticks of a clock I'd been winding for far too long. That moment wasn't born from a single cruel remark. It was the culmination of 1,000 unspoken betrayals, a slow erosion of my soul. As I leaned against the hallway wall, my mind drifted back to the life we'd built before everything shattered. 17 years ago, in a cozy apartment in Cleveland, Tom and I were the picture of middle-class bliss. I ran my bakery, rising at dawn to the scent of fresh bread, while he worked as a mechanic, coming home with grease-stained hands and a grin that could light up the room. We had our daughter, Sarah, a bright-eyed teen with dreams of college. We argued over silly things like whose turn it was to mow the lawn. But we laughed more than we fought. Life felt solid, predictable. Ours. Then came the crash, a stormy Thursday night when Tom was heading home from overtime at the shop. A distracted driver on their phone plowed into him at an intersection. By the time I rushed to the ER, the doctors were already delivering the verdict: severe spinal injury, permanent paralysis from the waist down. He'd need constant care, physical therapy, medications, assistance with everything from eating to using the bathroom. I remember nodding numbly, asking, "What do we need to do?" Because that's what love demands, right? You don't count the cost, you just step up. I sold the bakery a month later. the smell of yeast and sugar lingering in my clothes as I handed over the keys. It gutted me. But I convinced myself it was temporary. I'd reopen someday when things stabilized. I enrolled in caregiver certification classes, rearranged our home with ramps and grab bars, set alarms on my phone for his every need. Friends rallied at first, dropping off casseroles and offering to sit with him so I could run errands. But as months stretched into years, the support dwindled. People returned to their jobs, their vacations, their lives untouched by the constant grind. I stayed anchored in mine, a prisoner of devotion. One night, about a year in, I was helping Tom in the bathroom, my arms straining under his weight as he snapped at me to hurry up. By the time I got him back to bed, my muscles burned. But I whispered to myself, "He's hurting. It's not about you." And I pushed on. We couldn't swing full-time nursing on our insurance. Medicaid covered basics, but not the luxury of round-the-clock help. Tom resisted outsiders anyway, insisting only I knew how to do things right. So it fell to me, the baths, the feedings, the nail trims, even makeshift PT sessions to keep his legs from atrophying completely. Sarah was away at community college by then, calling weekly with updates on her classes. I'd tell her we were managing, urging her not to drop everything and come home. I didn't want her inheriting this weight. But as the years wore on, Tom changed, or maybe the accident just stripped away the facade. The man who'd once surprised me with wildflowers from the roadside stopped noticing me altogether. No more "I love you"s whispered in the dark. No grateful glances when I adjusted his pillows. Conversations devolved into grunts and demands. I'd ask about his day, and he'd mutter something dismissive, eyes glued to the TV. I clung to the vow we'd made in sickness and in health, convincing myself that endurance was the truest form of love. But a quiet voice inside me began to whisper doubts. This isn't living, it's surviving. I ignored it, burying myself deeper in routine, telling myself appreciation would come eventually. It never did. Instead, resentment simmered beneath his surface, bubbling out in snide comments like, "You're lucky I'm stuck here," or "I'd be out living my life." Each one chipped away at me, leaving me hollower, more invisible. The heartbreak didn't crash over me like a wave. It seeped in gradually, poisoning the well of our marriage drop by drop. I'd prepare his meals with care, only for him to complain they were too bland, too hot, never right. I'd change his linens, and he'd avoid my eyes, as if acknowledging me would admit his dependence. The worst were the nights I'd collapse into bed exhausted, only to wake to his shouts for water or repositioning. I stopped dreaming, literally. My sleep was too fragmented for that. I remember one evening, after a particularly grueling day where he'd berated me for hovering like a damn helicopter, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. Who was this woman with the dark circles and defeated posture? I'd once been Evelyn, the baker who entered county fair contests and won ribbons for her pies. Now I was just the wife, a role that had swallowed me whole. There were fleeting good moments, him humming an old tune from our dating days or chuckling at a sitcom rerun. I'd latch onto them like lifelines, pretending they signaled improvement. But they were illusions. Tom's bitterness deepened, his words laced with venom. "At least you're mobile. Must be nice not to be a burden." It felt like punishment for my health, as if my ability to walk made me the enemy. I tried broaching it once, softly, over lukewarm coffee. "Tom, I miss the us we used to be." He'd shrug, eyes on the remote. "Nothing's stopping you from walking out that door." And yet, I stayed, trapped by guilt, by the ghost of our vows, by the fear of what society would think of a wife abandoning her disabled husband. Sarah's calls became my lifeline. Though I sugar-coated everything, we're hanging in there. I didn't want her pity or her involvement. She'd escaped this life, And that was my gift to her. The house grew quieter, the walls closing in. Days blurred without human connection beyond Tom's curt commands. I hadn't written in my recipe journal in years, the one where I'd doodle new flavor ideas between shifts at the bakery. Flipping through it one day, I found an old entry. A life half-lived is like dough left to rise too long, sour and deflated. It hit too close. But I shoved it back on the shelf, unwilling to face the truth. Little did I know, change was brewing, subtle as a storm on the horizon. The routine had worn me to the bone. Each day a carbon copy of the last, alarms blaring for meds. The endless cycle of care that left no room for breath. The world outside our split-level home in the cul-de-sac marched on, neighbors hosting barbecues, kids riding bikes, holidays marked by twinkling lights we no longer bothered with. My phone stopped ringing. Old friends from the bakery assumed I was too busy, or maybe too broken, to reach out. Birthdays passed unnoticed, no cake. Just another pill schedule. One Christmas, I found myself staring at a string of lights in the garage, tempted to hang them just for me. But what was the point? Isolation had become my shadow. Then, after I collapsed from sheer exhaustion, up all night with Tom's flare-up, skipping meals to tend to him, the doctor insisted on part-time help. "You're no good to him if you're in the hospital yourself," she said bluntly. Enter Nurse Elena, a steady woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that saw through the facade. Tom resisted at first, grumbling about strangers poking around, but I put my foot down for once. This isn't optional. Tom, I need this. Elena came 3 times a week, handling the heavy lifting with quiet efficiency. Watching her maneuver the wheelchair without complaint felt like a revelation, someone else sharing the load. For those precious hours, I reclaimed fragments of myself, a walk around the block, feeling the crisp Midwestern air, a cup of tea savored on the porch swing, not gulped down standing. I started jotting notes in a blank notebook, simple things like, "The leaves are turning gold today," or "Elena complimented my garden tomatoes." It was mundane, but it sparked something dormant. One afternoon, she caught me humming an old Motown tune while folding laundry. "You've got a lovely voice," she said warmly. That night, alone in the spare room I'd claimed as my sanctuary, tears came, not from despair, but from the faint stir of self-recognition. Tom noticed the shift, his comment sharpening, "You seem awfully chipper when she's here. Don't get used to slacking off." But in those stolen moments, I wasn't his shadow, I was Evelyn again. And that taste of freedom was intoxicating. When Sarah announced she was visiting for the weekend, her first in over a year, nerves twisted in my gut like dough overworked. She'd built a career in marketing out in Chicago, thriving in ways I could only dream of now. I prepped obsessively, dusted her old room, baked her favorite apple crisp from my bakery days, even framed a faded photo of us at the lake pre-accident. She arrived looking vibrant, hugging me fiercely before heading straight to Tom. "Hey, Dad," she beamed, and his face transformed warm, engaged. The Tom I'd lost years ago. They bantered about her job, old family jokes, while I hovered in the doorway like an outsider. That evening, on the porch under a blanket of stars, I finally cracked, "Sarah, I'm drowning here. Your dad's. He's not the same. He barely speaks to me. Never thanks me. I feel like I'm fading away." She furrowed her brow. "Mom, he's paralyzed. Cut him some slack. He's dealing with more than you can imagine." The words stung like salt in a wound. "I'm living it every day. Alone," she sighed. "You've got Elena now. And you chose this path. You always said marriage means sticking through the rough patches." I recoiled, standing abruptly. "So I should just vanish into this role? He treats me like hired help." She crossed her arms defensively. Maybe he's depressed. You're being too sensitive. Sensitive? After giving up my dreams. My health? He lost his legs. Sarah. But I've lost me. She softened slightly but deflected. Just try to see his side. The next morning, I overheard her whispering to Tom, "Mom's overwhelmed, maybe go easier on her." His response, cold as ice, "She's always been a drama queen." My blood boiled. Betrayal layering on betrayal. When Sarah left with a quick hug and a hang in there, Mom, it felt like another door slamming shut. But Elena saw me that next shift. Her gaze probing, "Rough weekend." I nodded. And in that quiet acknowledgement, resolve began to harden. I couldn't keep pouring from an empty cup, not for him. Not for anyone. Dinner that night was straightforward, roasted chicken and veggies. Tom's usual without flair. I set the tray before him. And he scowled, poking at it dismissively. "What is this slop? Trying to poison me now?" I froze. "It's exactly what you like, Tom." He knocked the tray off with a swipe. Food splattering across the rug like accusations. "Clean it up," he barked. As if I were the help he'd mocked me as. Elena, who'd just arrived, witnessed it all from the doorway. Her expression a mix of shock and solidarity. I knelt, gathering shards with bleeding fingers, numb to the pain. Later, in the kitchen, she confronted me gently. "You don't deserve that treatment." I murmured excuses. He's frustrated, but they rang hollow. That evening, in the laundry room, my refuge of warm hums and folded linens, I overheard them again. Tom's voice, low and venomous. "She loves playing the victim. Always has. 17 years. And she's still just free labor. If I could get around, I'd ditch the nagging." The betrayal ignited something primal. A fire long smothered. I didn't rage or confront. Instead, I strode into the room, composed as a statue. Tom chuckled until he saw me, his face draining of color. Elena tensed, but I ignored her, fetching a brief from the cabinet and laying it in his lap. "What's this for?" he stammered. "Figure it out yourself," I replied evenly, turning on my heel. In the bedroom, staring at my reflection, I saw not the caregiver, but a woman reclaiming her worth. Sleep evaded me that night, not from turmoil, but from clarity. By dawn, I packed a duffel, essentials only, clothes, my notebook, a photo of Sarah as a kid. No grand exit, just quiet determination. I brewed coffee for myself, savoring it at the breakfast nook. The house's silence now empowering rather than oppressive. When Elena arrived, spotting the bag, she nodded knowingly. "Take care of you." I left notes for Tom, med schedules, emergency contacts, a reminder to call Sarah if needed. This wasn't abandonment, under Ohio law. I'd insured his care through insurance and her shifts. But I was done being invisible. Stepping outside, the morning sun hit my face like a benediction, warming the chill of years lost. I drove to a quiet bed and breakfast in the countryside. Nothing lavish, just space to breathe. That first night, in crisp sheets, I journaled furiously, reflections on the vibrant baker I'd been, the hollow shell I'd become, the resilient woman emerging. On day 3, a hike led to a lakeside bench where tears flowed, not bitter, but cleansing. 17 years of silence had cost me dearly, but no more. Calling Sarah, I spoke my truth. I needed this for me. Her apology came soft. "I'm sorry I didn't see it." Would I return? Maybe, but on my terms. Hanging up, I inhaled the fresh air, free from demands, from betrayal's weight. The price of my sacrifice had been high, but the cost of staying would have been my soul. For the first time, I chose me, and in that choice, found peace.